I never thought one boy could change the way I saw love, or myself. But then came the night I met him. An Amish boy, quiet, forbidden, carrying the kind of silence that spoke louder than words. I was used to solitude. My cabin in the woods was supposed to be a place no one could find me. But storms don't just break trees, sometimes, they break rules. That night, a knock on my door introduced me to someone I should never have touched, never have loved. And yet, from the moment I saw him, soaked, trembling, eyes pleading though his lips said nothing, I knew nothing would ever be the same. This isn't just a story about desire. It's about fear, longing, and what happens when the one thing you've been taught to avoid becomes the only thing your heart craves. The Amish boy who showed up at my cabin didn't just ask for shelter. He showed me love in its most fragile, forbidden form. And once I let him in, I realized there was no going back. The first time I saw him, he didn't speak. He couldn't. It was late, later than I normally stayed awake. The kind of night when storms claw at the roof, when the forest itself seems to shiver under the weight of wind and rain. My cabin was my fortress, my refuge. No one came here. That was the point. And then came the knock. It was so faint at first, I thought I'd imagined it. But then it came again, urgent, uneven, like someone too desperate to stop. I opened the door, and the world tilted. He stood there, drenched to the bone, curls plastered to his forehead, shirt clinging to his chest. His hands trembled at his sides, and his wide eyes, God, his eyes, looked as though they carried every secret in the world. He didn't say a word. For a moment, I just stared. He was young, maybe 19, maybe 20. Younger than me, but not by much. The plain clothes gave him away instantly, dark trousers, suspenders, simple white shirt. Amish. I had seen them in town sometimes, passing through with their wagons, heads down, eyes averted. But never like this. Never one of them, alone, on my doorstep, soaked and shaking as though the storm outside had chased him here on purpose. What are you doing out here? I asked, my voice barely rising over the rain. His lips parted, but no sound came. He swallowed hard, chest heaving, as if words lived in him but refused to be born. Come inside, I said finally, stepping back. You'll freeze out there. He hesitated. Just long enough that I saw the battle behind his eyes. Then he crossed the threshold, dripping water onto the wood floor, carrying the storm with him. Inside, the fire threw soft light across his face. I offered him a blanket, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking long enough to take it. So I draped it over his shoulders myself. He flinched at my touch, but didn't move away. Sit, I said gently, motioning to the chair by the hearth. He obeyed, silent, curling into the blanket like a wounded thing. His eyes followed me everywhere, dark and unblinking. I poured him tea, sliding the mug into his hands. He looked at it like he'd never seen one before. Then, slowly, he lifted it to his lips. Steam curled around his face, softening the sharp lines of fear. You don't have to talk, I said. Just warm up. Rest. But a part of me wished he would. Wished he'd tell me why he was here, why his silence felt heavier than the rain outside. The storm raged on, wind battering the cabin walls, thunder rolling low like a warning. But inside, the only sound was his breathing, and mine. Hours passed. He stayed wrapped in the blanket, watching the fire like it held answers I couldn't see. Every now and then, his gaze flickered to me. Quick. Shy. Like he was testing whether I'd still be there when he looked back. I should have asked more questions. I should have told him to leave when the storm cleared. That's what made sense. That's what a smart man would have done. But I didn't. Instead, I found myself studying the curve of his jaw, the way his lips parted when he breathed, the faintest tremor in his hands as though the world itself had pressed too hard against him. And in that silence, something stirred in me. Something dangerous. Around midnight, he shifted, pulling the blanket tighter. His eyes, those wide, searching eyes, found mine again. I held his gaze, refusing to look away. For the first time, he didn't drop his. The firelight flickered between us, and in that fragile glow, I felt it, the weight of something forbidden. Something neither of us could name, but both of us already knew. That night, I told myself it was just the storm. Just the strangeness of finding a stranger at my door. Just the way loneliness magnifies everything. But deep down, I knew. The Amish boy who sat silent in my cabin wasn't just passing through. He was about to change everything. The storm didn't let up until morning. When I woke, the fire had burned low, nothing but glowing embers in the hearth. He was still there, curled in the chair beneath the blanket, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. For the first time, I saw him without the veil of rain and shadows. His face was softer than I expected, lips curved faintly even in sleep, like he dreamed of something kinder than this world. His curls stuck to his forehead, drying in wild waves that made him look younger, almost boyish. Something tugged inside me. Something I didn't want to name. I started breakfast. The sound of the skillet must have woken him, because I turned and found him watching me, eyes half-lidded, wary but curious. "Hungry?" I asked, lifting the pan. He hesitated, then gave the smallest nod. I slid eggs and bread onto a plate, setting it in front of him. He stared at it, then at me, as if waiting for permission. "Go ahead," I said. Slowly, he picked up the fork, awkward in his grip. The way he ate, tentative, careful, made me realize he wasn't just hungry for food. He was hungry for permission. For space to exist without judgment. And I found myself giving it freely. By the second day, the silence between us began to shift. He still didn't speak, but he started moving with me. Helping split wood, carrying water from the pump, tending the fire without being asked. He watched everything I did with intense focus, as if memorizing each step. One afternoon, I caught him mimicking the way I tied my boots, fumbling with the laces until his fingers finally got it right. When he noticed me watching, his cheeks flushed, and he turned away too quickly. I smiled when he couldn't see. It was in the evenings, though, that the weight of his silence pressed hardest. We sat by the fire, the room wrapped in orange glow and shadows. He'd glance at me sometimes, eyes lingering a fraction too long. And though his lips never moved, I felt like we were having entire conversations in that quiet. One night, I pushed gently. "Eli," I said. He looked up, startled. His brows furrowed, confused. "I don't know your name," I explained softly. He hesitated, then lowered his gaze. His fingers traced the edge of the blanket, fidgeting. "Can you tell me?" I asked. He opened his mouth, closed it again. His throat worked like the word was trapped there, aching to be freed but locked away by chains I couldn't see. And still, without sound, he gave me an answer. His lips shaped it. "Eli." I whispered it back, careful, reverent. "Eli." His eyes flicked to mine, wide and vulnerable, like I'd touched something sacred. From that night on, I never called him anything else. The snow began falling 2 days later, soft white blanketing the forest, muting every sound. Cabin life became slower, quieter. We spent more time inside, sharing tasks in the small space. I learned the rhythm of his silences, the way his eyes softened when he was grateful, the way his shoulders eased when I didn't demand what he couldn't give. Sometimes I'd catch him studying me, the curve of my hand on the axe, the way I stirred the stew, the way I leaned back in the chair, boots stretched toward the fire. His gaze was heavy, but when I met it, he always turned away, cheeks flushed, lips pressed tight. That shyness, it was dangerous. Because it made me want to close the distance. One evening, I dropped a plate by accident. The sharp crack startled us both. Eli was on his feet instantly, kneeling at my side to help gather the pieces. Our hands brushed, and the contact sent a jolt through me, sharp, electric. I froze. He did too. For a long heartbeat, neither of us moved. His eyes lifted to mine, and in them, I saw something I wasn't supposed to see, longing. His lips parted, breath trembling. My pulse thundered in my ears. And then, just as quickly, he pulled back, retreating into silence, hands shaking as he shoved the shards into a pile. I let him. Because I was just as afraid of what might happen if I didn't. But that night, when he curled into the chair with the blanket tight around him, his gaze lingered longer. And I knew he felt it too. Something had started between us. Something neither of us could stop. And as the snow thickened outside, trapping us further in that cabin, I realized that the danger wasn't the storm anymore. It was what we were becoming inside. The storm turned into winter. Snow piled knee-deep outside the cabin, smoothing every shape of the forest into silence. Days blurred together in shades of gray and white, while inside, the fire painted everything gold. I thought solitude had been my closest companion. But now, solitude had a second shadow, Eli. We settled into a rhythm. Mornings, I'd chop wood while Eli hauled it back inside, his breath rising in clouds, curls damp with melted snow. Afternoons, we cooked, patched leaks, mended tools. Evenings, we sat near the fire, shadows flickering across the wooden walls, the hush of snow pressing around us like a secret. But within that routine, something else grew. It was in the way his hand brushed mine when he passed me a tool. The way his gaze lingered a second too long, then dropped like he'd been caught sinning. The way silence between us wasn't empty anymore but charged. I caught myself studying him the way he studied me, his calloused hands, the strong line of his jaw, the softness he tried to hide beneath lowered lashes. Every detail became a map I wanted to memorize. One afternoon, I found him standing by the window, staring at the snow. "You've never been away from them this long, have you?" I asked. He stiffened, his shoulders drawing tight beneath the shirt I'd given him. He shook his head once, slow. "Do they know where you are?" His silence deepened. His lips parted as if to speak, then pressed closed again. His eyes glistened with something raw, unspoken. I didn't push. But I understood. Whatever brought him here, it wasn't something he could go back to. And in that moment, I realized he wasn't just hiding from the storm. He was hiding from his world. That night, I offered him the bed. "You don't have to sleep in the chair anymore," I said. "It's bad for your back." He shook his head instantly, retreating further into the blanket. "I'll take the chair then," I pressed. "You need the rest more than I do." His lips parted like he wanted to protest, but the exhaustion in his eyes betrayed him. After a long silence, he rose slowly and slipped beneath the blanket on my bed. I sat in the chair across the room, the fire casting shadows over his face. He lay stiff at first, as though afraid the mattress itself might judge him. But gradually, his body softened, breath evening out, lashes brushing his cheeks. I should have looked away. But I didn't. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, he surprised me. When I woke, the fire was already lit. A pot simmered on the stove, steam curling into the cabin. Eli stood beside it, carefully stirring with one hand, his curls messy, his shirt loose around his shoulders. He turned when he heard me rise. And for the first time, a faint smile tugged at his lips. It was small, fragile, like a secret he'd never shared before. But it was enough to undo me. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice rough. His cheeks flushed, but he didn't look away this time. As days passed, little gestures like that multiplied. He began leaving the chair for the bed when I insisted, though he always pressed himself to one edge, as though keeping invisible boundaries intact. He touched my arm once when I nearly burned myself by the stove, his hand lingering longer than necessary. My skin burned hotter under his fingers than it did under the flame. Another time, when I laughed at my own clumsy joke, I saw the corner of his lips twitch, like he wanted to laugh too but wasn't sure if he was allowed. Every moment with him became a question of what was safe, and what wasn't. Then came the night the lantern went out. The wind howled so hard it shook the cabin walls, rattling every loose board. The fire dimmed low, shadows swallowing the room. I fumbled with the lantern, striking flint, cursing softly under my breath. Eli was suddenly beside me, his hand covering mine, steadying the match. His face was close, too close. In that brief flicker of light, I saw him clearly. The storm outside reflected in his eyes. The question neither of us dared to ask trembled there. The flame caught. Light spread. We both froze, staring at each other as if the world beyond the glass walls had disappeared. And then, almost as suddenly, he stepped back, the distance returning like a slammed door. But the silence that followed wasn't the same. It pulsed, alive, hungry. I lay awake that night, listening to the storm tear through the forest. Eli's breathing filled the room, soft and steady, but I knew he wasn't asleep. Neither of us was. I wanted to cross the room. To tell him I saw him, not just the silence, not just the fear, but the boy aching beneath it. But instead, I stayed where I was. Because I knew, once I crossed that line, nothing would ever be the same. And though I wanted it more than I could admit, I wasn't sure either of us was ready for the cost. Outside, the storm kept raging. Inside, so did we. The days of snow turned into weeks. The cabin, once my sanctuary, now felt like a trap, though not because of the storm outside. It was because of what I carried inside. Eli had become part of me, woven into every corner of my days. I no longer imagined waking to silence. I woke to the sound of his footsteps by the stove, the sight of him kneeling to feed the fire, the shape of him curled against the window as he stared at the frozen world. But with each passing day, the unspoken between us grew heavier. One morning, I caught him staring again. I had stripped down to wash, steam rising from the kettle I'd heated. My shirt hung loose around my shoulders. I turned just in time to see his eyes drop, cheeks burning scarlet. He moved quickly, almost guiltily, to the door as if he needed air. And I realized then what I had only suspected before. His silence wasn't emptiness, it was restraint. He felt it too. That evening, I tried to speak. We sat by the fire, the wood crackling low. I could see the weight pressing on him, the way he clenched his hands together, the way his breath came uneven when I leaned too close. "Eli," I said softly. "You don't have to be afraid here." His eyes snapped up, wide, searching my face as though I'd peeled away his armor. He shook his head sharply, his lips parting soundlessly, his whole body trembling with words unsaid. I reached forward, brushing my fingers against his knuckles. His flinch was subtle, but not from disgust. From fear. Fear of wanting what he wasn't allowed to want. The tension grew unbearable. One night, the fire had died too low, and I woke to find Eli shivering. Without thinking, I crossed the room and laid another blanket over him. My hand lingered a moment too long, brushing against his hair. His eyes opened. We froze, staring at each other in the dark. His breath hitched, lips parting. I could feel the heat of him, could almost taste the closeness. For one heartbeat, I leaned in. And he turned away, squeezing his eyes shut, a silent no pressed into the air between us. I pulled back, guilt cutting sharp in my chest. Because I wanted him. And wanting him meant breaking him. The next day, he avoided me. He chopped wood until his palms blistered, until I had to pull the axe from his hands. He didn't meet my eyes at breakfast, didn't sit by the fire that night. Instead, he retreated to the bed and turned his back to me. It was like a wall had risen between us again, thicker than before. I hated it. And yet, I understood. A week passed like that. One afternoon, when the snow thinned enough for sunlight to pierce through the trees, I found him outside, staring at the endless white. His shoulders shook. At first, I thought it was the cold, until I saw the tears slipping down his cheeks. I stepped closer. Eli. He spun, eyes wild, and shook his head violently. He tried to wipe his face, to bury the evidence, but his chest was heaving too hard. My voice broke. You don't have to hide from me. His lips parted. For the first time, sound escaped him, not words, just a ragged, choked noise, like a sob trapped in his throat. It gutted me. I reached out, but he stumbled back, hands raised as if my touch would set him on fire. The silence between us wasn't safety anymore. It was a cage. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams, listening to his uneven breathing from across the room. Every instinct screamed to close the distance, to hold him, to tell him he wasn't broken, that wanting didn't make him sinful. But I didn't move. Because I was terrified too, not of the world outside, but of what would happen if I gave in. The breaking point came with the thaw. Snow melted into mud, dripping from the roof in steady rhythm. For the first time in weeks, the forest stirred with life again. And with the thaw came reality. One evening, Eli stood at the door, his bag in hand. He didn't look at me when I asked, "You're leaving?" He nodded once, stiff. My chest tightened. "Where will you go?" No answer. Just silence, heavy and final. I stepped closer. "Eli, please. Tell me why." He finally lifted his eyes. And in them, I saw everything he couldn't say, the weight of his upbringing, the fear of being cast out, the guilt of wanting me, the terror of losing God if he gave in. I whispered, "Broken, do you want this?" The air between us burned. His lips trembled, his breath shuddered. And though no sound came, his eyes gave me the truth. Yes. Yes, he wanted me. But want was not enough. With trembling hands, he opened the door and stepped into the gray dusk. And just like that, he was gone. The cabin felt colder than ever. The fire burned, but it gave no warmth. I sat where he'd sat so many nights, staring at the empty chair, and felt the silence he left behind swallow me whole. Eli had changed everything. And now, he'd taken everything with him. And I couldn't decide what hurt more, losing him, or knowing that love had been right there, inches away, and I'd been too afraid to hold it. The cabin was quieter than it had ever been. When Eli left, he didn't just step out into the thawing woods, he took something with him. The silence he left behind wasn't the same as before. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was sharp, jagged, like shards of glass scattered across the floor. I tried to fall back into my old routines. Chop wood. Cook simple meals. Patch the roof where the thaw had worn it thin. But every task betrayed me. The axe felt wrong without him carrying the logs inside. The meals were tasteless without the quiet company across the table. The fire seemed weaker without his shadow flickering beside it. I wasn't alone before. I had chosen solitude then. But now? Now it felt like punishment. Nights were the worst. The bed was colder without his weight pressed against one side. I would wake in the dark, heart racing, half expecting to see him curled up in the chair, blanket draped around his shoulders, eyes catching the firelight. But the chair was always empty. I would sit there sometimes, clutching the worn blanket he left behind. It still held the faint scent of him, wood smoke, earth, something softer I couldn't name. I buried my face in it like a fool, trying to hold on to what had already slipped away. The ache in my chest grew heavier each day, swelling with words I never said, touches I never dared to give, love I never confessed. I began to dream of him. In the dreams, he wasn't silent. His lips parted, and his voice spilled out, low, hesitant, but warm. He spoke my name. He told me he wanted me. He let me hold him, kiss him, keep him. But when I woke, the truth was sharper than any blade. He was gone. And I had no way of finding him. A week passed. Then another. The thaw turned into spring, buds pushing through the damp soil, rivers rushing with meltwater. The forest came alive again. But I didn't. I found myself standing at the edge of the path that wound through the woods, staring into the trees, hoping to see his figure emerge from the distance. My chest ached with the absurdity of it. Why would he come back? And yet, some nights, I swore I heard footsteps outside the cabin. I would rush to the door, fling it open, only to find darkness, wind, nothing else. Still, I left the lantern burning by the window. Just in case. One afternoon, I found myself by the stream where he had once knelt to fetch water. I sat on the bank, staring at the rippling surface, and felt the weight of regret pressing down. I should have told him. I should have said his name more. I should have touched his hand when he trembled. I should have kissed him that night, when the firelight made his eyes glow like embers. Maybe then he wouldn't have left. Maybe then he would have believed that love could be more powerful than fear. But I hadn't. I'd let the silence win. And now it was all I had left. The loneliness became unbearable. I started talking to him even though he wasn't there. "Do you remember the first night, Eli?" I'd whisper to the fire. "You stood in the doorway, soaked through, too scared to even step inside. And I didn't know then what you'd become to me." Other nights, I'd whisper his name into the blanket, clutching it like it was him. I knew it was madness. But madness was better than emptiness. Then came the letter. It wasn't from him. It was from a trader who passed through town every few weeks, delivering supplies. He mentioned, casually, that he had seen a young Amish boy wandering the edge of the settlement miles south. My heart lurched. It had to be him. And if it was, he was too close. Too close to be safe. Because the world he had run from, the one that demanded silence, obedience, purity, would never let him go so easily. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the cabin, every step echoing with one thought: I had to see him again. I didn't care if he turned me away. I didn't care if he hated me for wanting him. I didn't care if the whole world condemned us. I just needed to look into his eyes once more and tell him the truth I had been too afraid to say before. That I loved him. The next morning, I packed a small bag, doused the fire, and stepped into the forest. Every path felt uncertain, but the pull in my chest was undeniable. It guided me, stronger than any compass. With each step, I heard echoes of him in the woods, the way he split wood, the way he laughed without sound, the way his eyes softened when I whispered his name. I followed those echoes, even though I didn't know if they would lead me to him. Because I realized something in the silence of the cabin, something I had been too afraid to admit until now. Eli had changed everything. And I couldn't let that be the end of the story. The road south was nothing more than dirt pressed into mud by wagon wheels. My boots sank into it with each step, the forest thinning as I drew closer to farmland. It had been years since I walked this way. I had chosen exile in my cabin precisely to avoid these places, villages bound by rules, eyes that judged, whispers that cut sharper than knives. But now, I walked willingly. Because somewhere beyond those fields, Eli was out there. The first farm came into view at dusk. A barn stood at the edge, lanterns flickering faintly in the windows. A horse snorted in the distance. And then I saw them. Men and women dressed plain, broad hats, bonnets, muted colors. Amish. The sight sent a chill through me. Not because they were dangerous in the way of weapons, but because their power was quieter, heavier. Their silence was not Eli's silence, it was the silence of rules, of obedience, of chains disguised as devotion. I kept to the shadows, my coat pulled tight, my breath slow. I didn't belong here. And if they knew why I had come, they would cast me out, or worse. For 2 days, I lingered at the edges of the settlement. I watched children carrying pails of water, women hanging laundry, men working the fields. But I didn't see him. At night, I returned to the woods, making camp beneath the stars, my heart pounding with each rustle of leaves, each creak of branches. I began to wonder if I was chasing a ghost. It was on the 3rd evening that I found him. Or rather, he found me. I had been sitting by a creek, eating a piece of bread, when I felt it, the weight of someone's gaze. I looked up. And there he was. Eli stood at the edge of the trees, plain clothes hanging loose on his frame, curls falling over his forehead. His eyes were wide, frightened, but not of me. For a moment, neither of us moved. The creek rushed between us, water catching the dimming light. Then I whispered, "Eli." His lips parted, trembling. His hands clutched at his sides, knuckles white. And though he said nothing, I felt the storm in his silence. I crossed the creek, boots sinking in the mud, heart hammering like I was walking into battle. When I reached him, I stopped a breath away. I wanted to touch him, to close the space, but fear held me still. "You left," I said softly. My voice cracked. "But I couldn't let you go." His eyes glistened. He shook his head, as if begging me not to make this harder. "Eli," I whispered. "Tell me to leave, and I will. But if you want me to stay, even if you can't say it out loud, just don't walk away." For a long moment, he stood frozen. Then, slowly, he reached out. His fingers brushed mine, tentative, trembling. It was enough. I caught his hand, holding it like a lifeline, and for the first time since he left, I breathed. We couldn't stay in the open. He led me deeper into the trees, where the shadows grew thick. Only then did his shoulders ease, just slightly. He sat on a fallen log, staring at the ground, twisting his hands. "I thought I lost you," I said. "I thought I'd never see you again." He lifted his gaze. And though no sound left him, his eyes screamed the truth. I thought of you every day. I knelt before him, daring to touch his cheek. His skin was warm, trembling beneath my palm. He closed his eyes, leaning into it just enough to shatter me. I don't care about their rules, I whispered fiercely. I don't care if the world calls this a sin. You are not a sin to me. You're the only thing that feels like truth. His breath hitched. His lips parted, like words fought to escape. But nothing came, just the silence, breaking and breaking inside him. And then, he pressed his forehead to mine. It was the closest thing to a confession he could give. But the danger wasn't gone. A sound snapped through the woods, voices, faint but approaching. Eli jerked back, panic flashing in his eyes. He grabbed my arm, urging me deeper into the shadows. We hid behind a cluster of trees as lantern light bobbed through the forest. Two men passed, their plain coats brushing branches, their voices low but sharp. Boy keeps sneaking out, one muttered. Ain't right. Needs stricter watch. My stomach turned to stone. They were looking for him. When they passed, Eli's hand clutched mine tighter than ever, his whole body shaking. I wanted to tell him we could run, that I'd take him far from here, somewhere no one would ever find us. But the fear in his eyes told me he wasn't ready. Not yet. When the woods were safe again, he finally let go. His breathing was ragged, his cheeks wet with silent tears. I pulled him into my arms, holding him against my chest. He didn't resist. His fists clutched my coat, burying into me like he was afraid I'd disappear. Eli, I murmured. I'll wait. However long it takes. Just, don't vanish again. He nodded against me, his curls damp with tears. And for the first time since the night he appeared at my cabin, I realized the truth. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was ours. And together, we were walking into a storm far bigger than any that had trapped us in that cabin. The forest was no longer a refuge, it was a cage of shadows, each rustle a reminder that discovery was only a breath away. Every night after that first reunion, Eli came to me. Always in silence, always with that same storm in his eyes. We would sit by the creek, our hands brushing, our shoulders touching in the dark. Sometimes he trembled, sometimes I did. And though no words passed between us, every heartbeat spoke the things we couldn't dare say aloud. But the danger pressed closer with every visit. I began to notice them, lanterns swinging at the edge of the woods, men patrolling long after the field should have slept. They weren't looking for foxes or thieves. They were looking for him. And every time I saw Eli appear from the darkness, my heart cracked between joy and terror. One night, the air was heavy with rain, the earth damp beneath my boots. I had been waiting by the creek longer than usual, my nerves fraying. Then, at last, he came. His hair damp with mist, his chest rising fast from the run. But tonight, something was different. His hands shook violently, and his eyes darted like a hunted deer's. I caught his arms. Eli, what is it? He didn't answer, he couldn't. Instead, he gripped my coat, tugging me deeper into the trees with urgency. We ran until the forest swallowed us whole, branches tearing at our sleeves. Finally, he stopped, leaning against a trunk, his chest heaving. His whole body trembled. I lifted his chin. His eyes burned with something I hadn't seen before, fear, yes, but also, shame. And then I heard it. Voices. Not far behind. Check the woods. He's not been right, that boy. Could be sneaking again. We'll catch him this time. The blood drained from my face. They were hunting him like a stray animal. I pulled Eli close, pressing my lips to his hair. Stay quiet. Stay with me. We crouched low as the lantern light flickered between the trees. My hand wrapped around his, feeling the sweat and tremors in his palm. The men's shadows passed within feet of us. My heart pounded so loud I feared they'd hear it. One paused, swinging his lantern. The glow lit the trunk we hid behind. I froze, holding my breath, Eli buried against me. A long silence. Then the man muttered, "Nothing here." The light drifted away. Their voices faded with the crunch of boots. But Eli didn't relax. Even when the danger passed, his grip on me stayed fierce, desperate, like if he let go, he'd be dragged back into chains. When the silence returned, he finally pulled back. His eyes glistened, and his lips trembled. I cupped his face. "You can't keep living like this. They'll break you, Eli. I won't let them." His breath came hard. He looked at me with something raw, pleading, aching, terrified. His silence screamed louder than words, "I don't know how to escape." I kissed his forehead, fierce and trembling. "Then I'll find a way. For both of us." He closed his eyes, tears spilling, and leaned into me. In that moment, I knew. We weren't just hiding anymore. We were on the edge of discovery, and if they caught us, they wouldn't just punish him. They'd destroy him. The next days blurred into a storm of secrecy. I returned to my cabin, restless, waiting for nights when he would come. Each time, the danger grew. Once, a lantern flashed too close, and we had to scatter in opposite directions, praying the forest swallowed our tracks. Another time, I found him sitting by the creek already crying, his shoulders shaking with the weight of silence. I wanted to tell him it would be all right, but even I wasn't sure anymore. And then it happened. It was a Sunday evening, the sky deep purple, when Eli came again. But tonight, he didn't stop at the creek. He took my hand and led me to a clearing I hadn't seen before, a place where wildflowers brushed our knees, and the stars poured down without obstruction. There, in the middle of that secret meadow, he turned to me. His hands shook, but he lifted them anyway, touching my face. His eyes locked with mine, glassy with tears. And for the first time, I felt his silence not as a wound, but as a vow. I bent and kissed him, soft, trembling, terrified. His lips pressed back, tentative at first, then with a hunger that shook us both. The world disappeared. No lanterns, no rules, no voices. Only us. But the world has a way of returning. A crack of branches split the night. We tore apart, breathless, heart-seizing. Lantern light spilled into the clearing. 2 figures stood at the edge, men from the settlement. Their faces hardened as their eyes fell on us. The silence between us shattered. My hand still clutched his, and I knew, we had been seen. The storm we had feared was no longer coming. It was here. The meadow that moments ago had felt like heaven became a noose tightening around us. The lantern light glared against our faces, too bright, too revealing. Eli's hand was still in mine, his chest heaving, his lips swollen from the kiss we could never take back. The 2 men at the edge of the clearing froze in shock. Then their expressions hardened into something colder than the night air. "Well," one of them spat, "ain't this the devil's work?" Eli flinched as if struck. I tried to shield him with my body, stepping forward. "Leave him," I said, my voice rough. "He's done nothing wrong." But my words were useless. To them, I was the intruder, the corrupter. To them, Eli was the lost lamb who had followed me into darkness. The taller man took a step closer, lantern swinging. His voice was low, dangerous. "We'll see what the bishop says." Eli's fingers trembled in mine. I could feel him unraveling. His silence was no longer the calm mystery I had fallen for, it was a scream trapped inside, tearing him apart. I turned, gripping his shoulders. "Don't be afraid," I whispered. "We'll find a way. Together." But when I looked into his eyes, I saw it, the crushing weight of years of obedience, of rules that had been beaten into his bones since childhood. He wasn't afraid for himself. He was afraid for me. The men stepped closer. I wanted to run, to drag Eli with me into the darkness of the forest, but his feet wouldn't move. He was rooted by fear, by loyalty, by the invisible chains of his world. One of them seized his arm. Eli gasped silently, his eyes wide, pleading. "No!" I shouted, grabbing for him. "You don't own him." The man shoved me back hard. I stumbled, nearly falling. My chest burned with rage, but Eli's desperate shake of the head stopped me from lunging again. His eyes begged me not to fight. And in that moment, I understood, if I made this worse, they would punish him more than me. So I stood there, trembling, watching as they dragged him toward the settlement. His gaze never left mine until the trees swallowed him whole. And then, he was gone. I stumbled back to my cabin like a man half dead. The storm in my chest was louder than any thunder I'd ever known. The fire burned low in the hearth, mocking me with its warmth. I collapsed into the chair, gripping my hair. I had promised him we'd find a way. Instead, I had watched him taken. And the worst part? He hadn't even fought. He had gone with them, silent, submissive, as if he believed this was his punishment for loving me. I buried my face in my hands and let the tears come, hot and raw. The days that followed were a blur of rage and despair. I paced the forest, searching for him. I lingered near the settlement, watching from the shadows as life went on, fields worked, laundry hung, children played. But Eli was nowhere. Once, I saw the bishop himself leaving a farmhouse, his expression grim. My stomach twisted with dread. What had they done to him? On the 4th night, I finally saw him again. He was walking with 2 older men, his head bowed, his steps slow. Even from a distance, I could see the change in him, shoulders hunched, spirit dimmed, like the fire had been beaten out. I wanted to call out. I wanted to run to him. But one look at the stern faces beside him froze me in place. If I tried, they would take him further from me. So I watched in silence as he disappeared once more. The next evening, I found a scrap of fabric caught on a branch near the creek, plain cloth, torn and frayed. My heart seized. It was his. He had been there, maybe reaching for me. And that tiny shred of fabric gave me the strength to wait. It wasn't until a week later that he came. I woke in the dead of night to a knock on the cabin door, soft, frantic. My heart leapt. I flung it open, and there he was. Eli. His face was pale, his lips cracked, his eyes red with unshed tears. He looked smaller somehow, as if the weight of his world had shrunk him. But he was here. I pulled him inside and closed the door. For a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other, trembling. And then I held him. He collapsed into me, fists clutching my coat, body shaking with sobs that had no sound. His silence was finally unbearable, it broke in shudders and tears, his whole body screaming what his lips never could. I stroked his hair, whispering, "I've got you. I've got you." Minutes passed. Maybe hours. Finally, he pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. And though he said nothing, his expression was clear: "They'll never let us be. We can't stay here." I nodded, fierce and certain. "Then we won't. We'll leave. Tonight. Right now." His eyes widened, fear and hope colliding. "Eli," I whispered, cupping his face, "if you come with me, there's no turning back. It'll be hard, it'll be dangerous. But it'll be ours. Our life. Our love. No one else's." For a heartbeat, he froze. Then, he nodded. A single, trembling nod. And that was enough. We packed nothing but a blanket, some food, and courage scraped from the bottom of our hearts. As dawn threatened the horizon, we slipped into the woods, hand in hand. Behind us, the settlement lay silent, unaware that two souls had chosen to defy it. Ahead of us lay only uncertainty. But for the first time, uncertainty felt like freedom. We didn't know where the road would take us. But we knew this much: whatever storm awaited, we would face it together. And that was everything. The road before us was nothing but earth and sky, stretching into an unknown horizon. We walked in silence, our hands locked, the blanket slung across my shoulder, the weight of everything we left behind fading with each step. For the first time, Eli wasn't glancing over his shoulder. His shoulders still trembled, but they weren't bowed. He walked beside me, not behind me. I looked at him as the rising sun spilled gold across his face. He caught my gaze, and though no words passed his lips, I saw it, clear, bright, undeniable. Freedom. We didn't know where the road would lead. Perhaps hardship waited, perhaps rejection, perhaps more storms than we could imagine. But there was one truth that could not be stripped from us now: we had chosen each other. I squeezed his hand, and he answered with a faint, steady smile, the kind that carried more courage than any spoken vow. For the rest of the world, our love might remain a sin. For us, it was salvation. And as we disappeared into the horizon, leaving behind the silence of his past and the shadows of mine, I realized something simple and eternal. We weren't running anymore. We were beginning. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true, raw LGBTQ+ love stories. Tell us in the comments, would you have the courage to walk away from everything for love? Hit the bell so you never miss the next story that could change the way you see love forever. Love is love. And every story deserves to be told.